There we go. Good evening, everybody. Happy spring. I believe spring actually started yesterday about 20 after 4 Central Time, if I'm remembering correctly. It's the first full day of spring. Let's go with that. And boy, the signs are coming fast and furious. We have a whole bunch of things I wanted to share with you tonight. But you know what? I've also got some mail here. I got around to checking the mailbox at Good Natured World headquarters. We each have a little slot down in the marketing office. And Kay, if you're on tonight, we'll start with you. Had a nice card with a note, and then a really interesting article about a book called Slow Birding: The Art and Science of Enjoying the Birds in Your Own Backyard. Boy, I love the concept of this book, and I love the idea of, as the author explains it, and the author is actually an animal behavior scientist. Sometimes those folks are called ethologists. Her name is Joan E. Strassman. She's also professor of biology at Washington University down in St. Louis. And she actually got the name from another area that's near and dear to my heart, the food arena. Maybe you've heard about slow food, the slow food movement, rather than hurrying and rushing everything. The slow food movement encourages people to just slow down and enjoy a meal. Well, right, buddy. Tech support puppy, by the way, is here. A few minutes late. We had to change our passwords today at work, and I could not get signed on. He was no help at all. Anyway, let's see. It says that slow birding is a all right. Let me try this one more time. It's not a checklist-driven bird watching, which may feel almost competitive, as if mandating that more is better and rarer is best. For a slow birder, and Dr. Strassman considers herself one, the payoff is not a longer life list, but connecting with and gaining insight into our inner circle of everyday birds. So really just paying attention to what's around us, and studying, and this makes sense seeing as she studies animal behavior, watching what they do as opposed to what they are. She had another quote in here I thought was great. It said, "Common does not mean boring." You know, I was on a walk. Gosh, this was probably shortly after I started working at the St. Charles Park District. It might have even been when I was still working for the Fox Valley Park District, but there was a walk at Norris Woods, which is our state nature preserve / park that's just north of Potawatomi Park on the east side of the Fox River. And it was a spring migration walk. It was led by one of our area's many fine birders. And the emphasis was on warblers and neotropical migrants. So that put us in probably early May. What I remember about the day was that it was a rainy day, which are my favorite days. It wasn't raining hard enough to cancel the walk. There wasn't any lightning or thunder. But there were a large number of birds that had been moving through and had been sighted. And so the goal for a lot of people was to see how many they could see. Well, we gathered in the parking lot at Norris, and I happened to notice a robin that came down and went to an area of mud. And she was pushing her bill down into the mud, gathering up like big old beakful. Then she flew up in a tree, and she was building a nest. And I thought that was the coolest thing. When you think about it, when and robins are one of well, actually probably the species in the area that uses mud as the plaster that holds their nest together. And mud is, if it's a drought, mud can be hard to find. A rainy day is the perfect time then, if you need mud. Rainy days are the perfect time to be building your nest. So I was watching her going down to the mud and up to the nest and back and forth. And it was absolutely fascinating. I actually, lost sight of the group for some time because I was slow and stayed behind. I didn't see nearly as many birds as the rest of the people on the walk, but I saw a lot of that one bird and what she was doing. I thought that was pretty cool. So, Kate, thanks so much for sending this article. And again, those of you who might be interested in this book, it is called Slow Birding, the Art and Science of Enjoying the Birds in Your Own Backyard, Joan E. Strassman. I think this looks like the Times. Did you say it was the New York Times? I'd be glad to send anybody a copy of this if they'd like to read the article. Next up, we had a nice little card from my friend Vanessa, who she drops by the office every once in a while, and she always brings little gifts. And this gift, it's a game called Match a Track Near You. Match 25 animals to their paw prints. So there's no lip balm included in this, but it's a neat little guide to getting to know the shapes. Not so much the sizes, because here we have a bear track, and then here we have a chicken track. So either really big chickens or really tiny bears. But anyway, it gives you a general idea of the shape and size of a lot of birds, mammals, and there's even a few reptiles on here. The first one, they're cards. This game is a set of cards. We've got the animals on one side, and then you have to match them up to their tracks on the other thing. I think it's kind of like a conservation, not conservation, what's the word I want? Concentration, like a game of concentration where you try and match up rather than pairing the same pictures together. You match the animal with the track. That's how I would play it anyway. I thought it too, it was interesting. When I looked at the box, I could tell this was a UK game, not a US game. Can you see why? There's a couple different clues here on the cover. Now, pigeons are pretty ubiquitous, and so are chickens. Red foxes, there's some debate as to whether they were introduced here in the US from the UK or if they made their own way over here. But our deer looks a little different. Hogs, lots of different breeds of those. But here, look at our badger. That's a European badger. See the stripes on the head? They're more prominent than the stripes that we see on the North American badger. But still a fun game. I think I might take this out to Hickory Knolls. It might be a good thing to do, have our camp counselors use on days when maybe it's too hot or too wet to be outside the whole time. Anyway, that was a pretty nice, pretty fun thing to find in the mailbox. And then there was an envelope that went to Potawatomi, and it didn't have a note or anything in it, but as I dug through my email inbox, I found a note from a woman who was responding to a column I'd written a few weeks ago about our the frog monitoring training that we conduct. I'd written about my love of frogs, my lifelong fascination with frogs, and the different adventures I've had over time. Well, she's had a lot of very similar escapades with frogs. And in addition to fancying live frogs, she also likes Kermit the Frog. So she sent me this copy of a book. It's called Kermit's Garden of Verses. And it must have been printed. A lot of the illustrations in here look like they're about a 1982 vintage, which was either during or right after the Muppet Show appeared on television. That was always a favorite show to tune into. I love the Muppets. Well, she had marked in here some of her favorites, and this one I thought was particularly appropriate for frog monitoring. I'm guessing Kermit had a lot to do with these verses that are in here. This poem is called Sounds, and it says, I like the sound of happy, but not the sound of sad. I like the sound of peaceful, but not the sound of mad. Some silver sounds are precious, like forest, pond, and bog, but one certain sound is special, the golden sound of frog. So, a little illustration, Kermit pulling his way across the pond, like frogs do. Anyway, it was kind of fun. Makes me want to check the mailbox more often. Oh, and you know what? I can't remember who handed me this. This was cool too. I put this in the frog pile. So this is from the single panel cartoon Randolph Itch. And it says dinner by candlelight. And it's two frogs. And they're eating what's attracted to the candles. I thought that was pretty clever. And the note, attraction is in the air. But drawing a blank on where this came from, but I love it. And I had it up on my bulletin board at work. It's now in the frog poetry. I'm using it as a bookmark there. Anyway, let's move along. Let's see, we got a couple of chats here. I'm learning to check that more often so that we can actually comment while it's still relevant. Let's see. Saw the slow birder. Oh, Susie actually saw the author. Very interesting concept was that we should take the time to see the birds. She went to a nearby park daily and kept a journal for years. Yes, it was in the New York Times. Pam, is there a good resource for tracks in the snow? Okay, let me get back to you on that. We do have a couple of good resources for that. Well, in fact, while I'm thinking of it, I don't have it in my hand at the moment. It's not specific to tracks in the snow, but it's my absolute favorite tracking book. And a lot of the pictures do show snowy tracks. It's a book called Tracking and the Art of Seeing. As we've discussed in the past, a lot of these great books are no longer in print, but I think that one went through at least 2 and maybe 3 printings. Tracking and the Art of Seeing by Paul Rezendes, R-E-Z-E-N-D-E-S. He's a wildlife photographer and also a tracker. So he includes in each little chapter, which focuses on, it's all mammals that he wrote about, but each chapter, he has a bit of the animal's life cycle, a little bit about the habitat they prefer, times of year that they're most active, that sort of thing. And then he has tracks and then other signs they might leave behind. Scat, if they gnaw or chew on things, maybe midden piles, food remnants that they leave behind, how an animal might, like a cougar or bobcat, might bury their food to come back later. I actually wrote him, I saw him in the Smoky Mountains. This goes back probably, oh, I don't know, close to 20 years ago. I found what looked exactly like something my cat would have hocked up. But it was grass covered in saliva, and there was hair in it. So, you know, it looked like a hairball with grass. And I talked to the park naturalist there in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and they said that they do have bobcats in there. They didn't say anything about cougars, and this wasn't, you know, a huge hairball. It was pretty small, like not that much bigger than what house cat would produce. And I had just read Paul Rosenda's book, so I looked him up. At that time, email was kind of new, and I don't even think we had email at work. Anyway, I sent him a little note, and he wrote me back, and he said, yeah, bobcats can cough up hairballs, and he thought that could have been what I found. Now, maybe he was just being nice. Maybe he didn't, you know, like, don't encourage her, just, you know, placate her and let her move on. I don't know, but he struck me as a you know, nice enough guy to write back to some curious girl who was wondering about hairballs. So tracking in the art of seeing. Now, if you want something specific for snow, let me think on that some more, Kay. I know there's some little books that the Arboretum produced for a while, and I thought there was one on tracks in the snow, but I'd have to check in the Good Natured Library, see if I can find that. I'll let you know. So with that, we've got dog number 3 here, who's dying to get up on the sofa where the action is. So he's going to come up to. This is Joey. Come here, buddy. Up. Number 2 does that one or there. Get all right. So as to avoid a major disruption, we're just going to see if I can keep him happy here next to me on the floor, as opposed to next to me on the sofa, while we get our screen share for tonight going. So let's, boy, you know, this is something that I guess our IT department has come up with. I never have that Park District site up, but it always comes up when we do our shares. A little free advertising, I guess. Anyway, I'd like to start off tonight with something I saw posted on Facebook that, well, what caught my eye was one of our former employees, now a veterinary student down at the University of Illinois, Mr. Tyson. He worked on this case in the wildlife medical clinic down at U of I at Urbana-Champaign. So just to paraphrase this post, a turkey vulture was brought in that was just hanging out in somebody's backyard. This was an animal whose death was probably preventable if we humans would just get our acts together and quit making such a mess of things. She had an unmeasurably high level of lead, which there's a lot of animals, eagles, anything that scavenges on carcasses is apt to ingest lead. In fact, even the California condors that are you know, critically endangered, that's still something they're trying to prevent them from suffering from, is lead poisoning. A lot of shot being used in hunting still contains large amounts of lead. So yeah, scavengers are at risk for that. But she also had other things like foil in her digestive system. It was a blockage. She had a BB. She had foil. There was fur, pieces of plastic, you know, things that really, you know, we should be doing a better job of picking up after ourselves. But here's Tyson holding the vulture, this turkey vulture. Here she is. very unnatural posture in the cage. And yes, unfortunately, the bird did not survive. And this is what was found inside. They can see the BB down here at the bottom in the foil, the plastic. This is a really ugly time of year in terms of the trash that we see, but it seems like it gets a little worse every year. I think one problem, there are those people who do, toss stuff out of car windows, but another thing I see a lot of is trash that flies out of the transfer trucks as they take the trash that's picked up curbside, then it's moved out to the landfills to the west of here. And I'm right now I'm teaching a class on Wednesday mornings out at NIU, Northern Illinois University, out in DeKalb, and I'll see these trucks heading out that way. And it's not a lot of things, but a bag here, things bounce out of these trucks, and they end up on our roadsides, places where these birds might be scavenging for other things. So they might be, picking at a rabbit that got hit by a car, but that rabbit happens to be sitting on top of the ring from a milk jug, or something else that has made its way to the roadside. So anyway, I know as things warm up, there's going to be a lot of crews out picking up. And I know some of us volunteer our time keeping, but adopting roadsides to keep clean. Guess we have to just keep working in it, and maybe we can together help prevent things like this from happening. All right, preaching to the crowd about that. Let's move on. Susie, you pointed this out, and this kind of made me chuckle. So what we're looking at here are this is downtown St. Charles, and these are the planters that are on the Illinois bridge. So we're a block south, block downstream from Main Street. This is an area that has a bit of a history with some local wildlife, specifically these guys here. We actually got a call at Good Natured World headquarters last year. It was in April of last year, which is when I took this. It's supposed to be a video, but it doesn't really matter if this wasn't there. There's no great activity here. It's just a pair of geese sizing up the planters, which they wanted to use for nesting purposes. This city, it's actually a pretty decent location if you're a bird looking to lay your eggs. It's relatively predator proof. However, none of the eggs that were deposited there last year ended up hatching. A lot of them got smashed, and I have a feeling it's because of the nightlife that occurs on the weekends. I don't know that it was animals. Who knows? Maybe a raccoon did get up there and do something to those eggs. But the problem when these birds are nesting, they now. I had a little issue, but this is a sign that the city would put out every year. They didn't ask me for how it should be worded. I don't necessarily think of geese as aggressive. I think of them as defensive, because they're just protecting what is theirs, what's their future family. But it was getting to a point where, especially with the increase in nightlife in this area, this is just, this bridge is just west of Pollyanna Brewing and the Flag, I always say the wrong thing. It's not Flagstaff, it's Flagship restaurant. And then there's also restaurants over here on what would be the west side of the river. So more foot traffic, especially in the evenings when the birds would be apt to be around the nest. So the city solution was to build those little plywood ramps. There's plenty of other places for the birds to nest. I think it was a pretty good solution that they engineered. Those ramps will come down a little bit later on in the summer. Those planters are maintained by members of the Potawatomi Garden Club. Another video that's not going to play. But this leads us to Susie's other discovery last week. This is the mystery of the shiners. I don't know what to make of this. Now this, I didn't think to put my lip balm down next to these fish. They're a little bit longer than a lip balm, so a little bit longer than 2 5/8 inches. And there were several on the upstream sidewalk. So on the north side of the Illinois Bridge, they were on that sidewalk, and then they were along the river walk that leads over on the river side of the buildings on First Street. Local folks, you can picture that in downtown St. Charles, leading towards Alter Brewing. There were several, and I don't know how they got there. I don't know if this is, these are not fathead minnows. They're a type of shiner, which would be considered something you would find in the Fox River. I want to say maybe spot fin shiner, but I'm not sure. Spot fin shiners have a spot right at the base of their tail. These fish were kind of strewn around. Some were missing their heads, which kind of made me wonder if gulls had been feeding on them. But this was such a small area, relatively small area, that they were found in. One side of the bridge and the river walk north of Illinois. I walked later on south of Illinois, and they were not along the river walk on that part. I just don't know what to make of it. Fish, some with it. Now, one possibility, if these are sold in bait stores, I suppose this could have been a frustrated fisherman. I know smallmouth bass will go after shiners. Why the fish were strewn over what would amount to like a block long or block and a half long area, I don't know. These are the kind of things that can keep me up at night. But if anybody has any opinions, or if you know the answer, if you're responsible, I would love to hear about it. You can let us know in the chats. All right, so boy, I did a lousy job of taking this picture. I should have positioned my camera a little bit higher, but this is one of 2 little water stations I have on my deck. I've found that some birds prefer the sloped bowl of the heated bird bath that I have out on the deck, and some birds like the straighter sides. This is just a saucer from an old planter. It's about, I don't know, 10 inches or so around, but and it's usually smaller birds that go to this. The chickadees like this, the finches like this particular watering dish. You can see it was frozen today. It's not heated, so they don't take advantage of it. They can't take advantage of it all winter, but when we've had some warm weather, it's been very popular with those smaller birds. Bigger birds, the mourning doves, the robins, now that they're back. Let's see, who else do I say? Sometimes the smaller birds will be over at the slope sides of the heated bird bath too. But anyway, this is one big honkin' dropping here in this, and I don't know who left it here. We zoom in, you can see that white matter, as we see on bird droppings, it's the urates. Remember, birds, they just have one all-purpose chute out the back called a cloaca, similar arrangement to what we see in reptiles. But this thing was enormous, and I don't know, I'm bummed that I missed it. Yeah, I'm bummed that I missed who dropped it there. Sometimes birds, the first drop that they make in the morning. The bird isn't necessarily that large, but they've held it all night. So it ends up being a big deposit. But this, I don't know, this just struck me as being really large. So I'm gonna maybe have to get the old trail cam out and face it at this bird bath and see if whoever left that one will come back and leave us another one. All right, let's move on in case any of you are having a evening snack. So this is I took this is in the grass along Peck Road. I was out at Hickory Knolls the other day getting some materials for another class I was doing, and happened to notice, and this is something we always see at this time of year, these are the trails that that voles leave behind as they are going back and forth about their business in the grass. Voles, they don't see real well, but they have a great sense of smell, and they will mark their trails with urine. I don't know if they're purposely marking them, or I've also been told that voles, as well as mice, they just have really weak bladders. If you've ever dealt with mice, I know I've got some trails in my garage. You can just see where the mice have dripped their way along the foundation, the concrete foundation, but they follow these trails, especially if there's a little snow on the ground. They go out, they forage, they go back to their nest, which looks like an upside down bird's nest in the grass. Or you can see this is, these trails are in the mowed area, but it backs up to an unmowed natural kind of a strip of unmowed grasses that provides a lot of cover for the voles. Well, I had heard from one of our volunteers last week. I can't remember if we talked about this or not, how he was concerned about what had been brought to his attention by his lawn care, his lawn service. They had pointed out that he had some vole activity. This is something that we see in the winter. The grass is dormant, so the voles are going back and forth. They're following this little trail that they've laid down for themselves, and they wear these patterns into the grass. But once the grass starts to grow again, these trails tend to disappear. You can rake it a little bit, get the dead grass out of there. But that once the grass is actively growing again, these aren't such a big deal. There were a couple different places where I could see this activity. The volunteer who contacted me, he had put out a snap trap, he'd put out poison bait, he'd put out a sticky trap, all in the efforts to catch, and these were all outside things. And kind of made me shudder at all the things, all the non-target things he could be catching, in addition to the little vole that honestly could have moved on, or it might have been caught already. Voles are the #1 prey item for so many animals in our area: hawks, owls, coyotes, foxes, even our own pets, dogs and cats. Will chase after voles. They're nature's baked potatoes. So I talked to our volunteer and tried to encourage him to just be patient. The voles have a very short life expectancy, and this sort of damage does too, because once the grass starts to grow, this damage will be minimized. But as I was looking at these two different spots in the park grass, I noticed over here, let's see if we can zoom in up. Look at that. This was right next to those trails. This is the, I couldn't tell if this was a large scat from a fox or a small scat from a coyote, but it's got the twisty qualities of a wild canine. So it was one of those two. And it was probably there hunting voles. Oh. All right, let's move on. The real reason I was walking in that grass was because that blob on the street caught my eye. Boy, I apologize if any of you are really trying to have a snack. We are going through quite a series here of not so pleasant photos. So this is the left turn lane on Peck Road that lets drivers turn into James O'Brien Community Park, which is where Hickory Knolls is. I saw this as I was pulling in, and so I went back to take photos. This is a sign of the time of year that we're in, which is the precursor to the breeding and the nesting phase of the red-winged blackbird's annual cycle. Well, this isn't just one, but two males, and I can just picture how this must have happened. Male red-winged blackbirds, they come back before the females do to claim their territories, and they use those red epaulets on their shoulders. They flare those at each other to say, this is mine, you go away. No, this is mine, you go away. And these two guys I've seen, maybe you've seen it too, where they do battle midair and they're fluttering at each other. I have a feeling that's exactly what happened. And unfortunately, it was in the middle of Peck Road, and these two guys didn't survive. So there's two red-winged blackbird territories available now on Peck Road between Campton Hills Road and Route 38. But it's a sign of the season. These birds are highly territorial right now, and unfortunately for these two, their bit of mid-air battle did not end so well. All right, let's move on. Diane, I'm not sure if you're on the call tonight, but you had sent me some photos a while back that I was just so excited to see. You're looking under rocks in streams. That really touched a chord with me. For most of my growing up years, our summer vacations were spent up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. My aunt and uncle had built a cabin up there on the Menominee River back in the 1950s. And for all of our formative years, my cousins and I would go up there for our summer vacations. And there's a rock in the river by the cabin that I spent incredible amounts of time just perched on, kind of hunched over like a green heron, looking at what was in the water and then catching what was in the water. And it was crayfish and little fish. I love to just net them and look at them and then put them back. And if I catch a crayfish and I'd catch another crayfish, and I'd compare them to see if they were the same kind, if they were different, have little imaginary fights with them, that sort of thing. In all that time, never picked up a rock to see what was underneath it, other than to move it to see if there was a crayfish underneath it. But I never looked to see what was actually living on those rocks. And it wasn't until I got involved in this field of nature education, and I started teaching or learning about water quality monitoring, and then teaching kids how to go out and gauge the quality of whether a stream was polluted or not by what's living in it. And Diane, you're doing the same thing. You're looking at what's not living under the rocks for shelter, but as actually living on the rocks. And you found these caddisflies. So caddisflies, they are the aquatic equivalent of the moths that we see on land. Moths belong to the order Lepidoptera, and caddisflies belong to the order Trichoptera or Trichoptera, depending on who's pronouncing it. Lepidoptera means scaly wings. Trichoptera means hairy wings. And both moths and caddisflies have little squishy, soft green larvae, or not always green, but soft bodied larvae that they develop from. They go through the egg stage, the larval stage, the pupal stage, and then the adult stage. The adult stage for a lot of caddisflies and some moths is really pretty short, just a few days. They don't feed at that stage. There are some moths that feed and stick around for a while, but most caddisflies are not very long lived in their adult phase. But in the water, they will live for a year. And that's why they are such good indicators of water quality. They need well oxygenated water, and they need fairly clean water in order to survive. Now, there's many, 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 many different kinds of caddisflies. Some make these cases here that Diane had found. These are made from bits of rocks and sand that the animal, the little larvae, will gather together and glue. It's a protective case, and they will crawl around underneath these rocks. Sometimes they'll even attach themselves to the rocks and let the food come to them. Kind of depends on the species or the family, how they do their foraging, but that case protects their soft body. It's not just something they use to pupate in. Like a moth caterpillar, they only make a cocoon when it's time for them to pupate and turn into an adult. The caddisflies, so they will make these cases and either wear them as they move around, or they will affix them to the bottoms of rocks and feed as the particles of detritus that's in the water flows past them. It reminded me of some cases that we have in the ephemeral wetlands behind Hickory Knolls. These are, see if I put it, did I put it on this? Yeah, Limnophilidae. This is a family within that order, Trichoptera. It means pool or marsh loving. So rather than the flowing water caddisflies like Diane had found, these insects prefer quiet water. Same thing though, they collect materials around them and they glue them together, and then the larvae is inside there. Now this looks, just like a big wad of plant material with some duckweed stuck on it, but there is a caddisfly larvae in there. When on a warm spring day, I think I took this photo. Oh, we can look here on the side. I took it on April 3rd, 2016. So springtime, I remember standing in this ephemeral pool, looking at these caddisflies, and it looks just like plant parts at the bottom of the pond, but they're moving, and they're moving with purpose. They're moving along, and you'll see them stop and graze, and then you'll see them change direction. It's really cool to see, and there were quite a few of them out there. Well, it wasn't until later that I made the connection between this and this. Now this, so this is an adult caddisfly. The caddisflies in those smaller cases made out of stone and sand, those will come up out of the river, gosh, by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions at a time. A lot of people who are in downtown St. Charles, when those caddisflies emerge, they call them river bugs. They are sometimes so thick that you kind of have to brush them off your windshield. People complain that they get them in their mouths, they get them in their hair. I know our custodian at the Baker building, because they're attracted to light, these caddisflies are attracted to light. He has to keep sweeping out the vestibules of the Baker Community Center when there's a large emergence of caddisflies. Well, these larger pond loving caddisflies. They're not present in quite as large a number, so we don't see quite as many of them, but this is one that had made its way up to the nature center. Let me see if we can zoom in a little bit here. You can see it looks very similar to a moth. But look at these antennae. Moths do not have antennae like this. Moth antennae are either thread-like, so thin and look like two thin little threads, or they are feathery. They look like a feather or like a fern frond. These though have a lot of segments to them. Eye arrangement is a little different. I can't really zoom in too much farther there on the wing, but if we were to look at that wing under the microscope, we would see that this color pattern is made up of tiny little hairs as opposed to the scales that we would see on a moth. Oops, close your eyes. That's the big finish. I do have one other item that I'll show once we're done with this segment, because there is yet another cool aspect to the caddisfly, something that even non-nature people can appreciate. So little teaser, we'll get back to that in a minute. All right, let's go on. Let's look here at what was sent to us. So this picture was taken this past weekend. We are in full swing with our salamander monitoring out in the Hickory Knolls Natural Area. I think we're up into the dozens of salamanders that have been caught. And these are the salamanders that are coming up out of their burrows, where they spend about 11 months of the year. But for 1 month's time, they leave. They come down out of the hills. They head to our ephemeral ponds, our wetlands that are at the west end of the Hickory Knolls Natural Area. That's where they breed. Our restoration crew has set up a series of pitfall traps where the salamanders are little buckets that are buried into the ground. So the top of the bucket is right at ground level. Salamanders come walking along. They hit a little metal fence that we have put up. It's actually just roof flashing. They're in lengths of, I forget if it's 8 or 10 feet lengths of roof flashing. Salamanders hit that. They walk along the edge of the flashing until they find an opening, which is where the bucket is. Every morning at 6:30, our crews are out there checking those buckets, making sure that the salamanders aren't going to get eaten by any opportunistic predators that come along. But every year we trap between 90 and 100 salamanders just in one location. We've got 3 or 4 places where we could be monitoring, but this is a means of seeing how our restoration efforts are affecting the animals that are living in the areas that are being restored. We still have a lot of honeysuckle and buckthorn, some garlic mustard, invasive species that make it difficult for us to see regeneration of some of the plants like oak trees, hickory trees, and our spring wildflowers. When there's a heavy cover of honeysuckle shading the woodland floor, those plants don't get the sunlight they need. So our restoration crews are out there cutting these things down. They also have to dab those stumps with herbicide to make sure they don't resprout. We want to make sure that all that restoration activity is not harming the animals that live there. So the good news is that in the 9 years that we've been monitoring the salamander population, the numbers are holding steady and maybe even trending up a little bit. So it's good to know that the work that's going on is not harming the residents back there. And it's also kind of cool to see that besides salamanders, we do have other residents back there as well. This is a spring peeper that was in one of the buckets on Saturday. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So peepers, their scientific name is Pseudacris crucifer, and it refers to this cross or this X on the back. Pseudacris means false cricket. So it's a little frog that is not a cricket, but it sounds a little bug-like in the sounds that it makes. These guys are named spring peepers for the peeping sound that they make, the high-pitched beep, beep, beep. They're a species that is not terribly common and is not found throughout King County. There's select areas. We're happy that one of those areas is at Hickory Knolls. So exciting find to see the peepers are out. We had some chorus frogs show up as well. So some good news, some good activity that's happening out here in the Hickory Knolls natural area. I think, oh, you know what? I did have one more. I forgot. I got one more slide here. This was something someone had shared with me, and it kind of made me chuckle. This is actually from a Saturday Evening Post cover, July 1st, 1961. It's not a Norman Rockwell. It was an artist named John Philip Vulture. And I guess this is making the rounds on Facebook. It made me chuckle because I looked up a little bit about the artists and what they were trying to show here. And on the surface, it's kind of like neat versus sloppy. But then I guess there were some commentaries on classism and the changing face of neighborhoods in urban areas, and how executives like to play handyman on the weekends, and the handyman likes to play executive. He's sitting there in an office chair with his feet up on his somewhat unkempt front porch. But what made me chuckle was, as far as what house I would like to, what person I would like to be associated with, I was looking at all the how much healthier the so-called sloppy yard is for the wildlife. They're clearly not using any sort of weed control, and there's no chemicals being sprayed there, so the pollinators are probably pretty happy. All this trimming over here, he's taking away overwintering habitat for a lot of our native bees. This monoculture of a lawn isn't going to support much life. They did have looks like a little bluebird, maybe a bluebird of happiness there on the bird bath. But now zinnias, those look like zinnias. Zinnias are a pretty good plant if you want to do something non-native and help our pollinators. Zinnias do attract and provide pretty good food for bees, as well as butterflies and hummingbirds. But I don't think that's where the artist was going with it, but it did kind of make me chuckle, and hopefully it makes you chuckle too. Anyway, let's shut down the share because I did have this one more thing here I wanted to show you. Let's see. Boy, my computer's at an angle. I guess I've been tilted all the time. I didn't do a good job of getting the computer set up straight. Anyway, these, all right, let's let the camera focus, hold still. These are earrings made by Caddisflies. There's a couple of companies, and there's probably, now that we've got places like Etsy and eBay, where you can shop for things that people make themselves. This was though earrings that I bought, oh gosh, sometime in the early 2000s, maybe around 2005. And of all places, the Red Rocks natural area. Is that a national? It's not a national park, outside of Las Vegas. So middle of the desert. In their gift shop, they had a display of caddisfly jewelry made by or produced by a company called Wildscape. I checked and they are still doing this. It's a couple of entomologists, and what they do is they capture, they raise caddisflies in stream tanks inside, and instead of what would be a normal outdoor substrate like sand and tiny pebbles, they replace it with little gemstones. So you can they make all different kinds. There were some that were pyrite that were pretty cool, fool's gold. So they were nice and flashy. But I chose these, and I don't remember now what the gemstones were, but it matched an amber pendant that I have. So the amber pendant has, I think it was a prehistoric little wasp encased in it, and it matches the insect-made caddisfly earrings. So Wildscape, I think it's wildscape.com if you want to get some caddisfly earrings of your own. They are kind of dangly, so they're kind of fancy. I don't wear them just every day. It has to be a special occasion, but really cool and made by insects. All right, with that, okay, Nancy checked, and Paul's book is still available on Amazon. That's good to see. So again, Tracking in the Art of Seeing, a great book. If you're looking to learn more about non-mammal tracks like birds or insects wouldn't be tracks in the snow, but I've got some resources for that too. If anybody's interested, just let me know. Pam, in the first picture of the vole, oh, we'll go back and look at that, Greg. It looks like a vole at the top of the picture. That'd be really cool if it was looking out at me. And Diane, oh, that's great. Peepers out at the Bolcom Road wetland, because yeah, they are not everywhere. And I know that the moderators, the coordinators for the Calling Frog project are always anxious to discover where those peepers are living. Let's just go back real quick and check that out, Greg, because now I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It just looked like it to me.
Okay, well, let's see. There used to be back when Peck Farm first opened, the very first managers out there, Dilip Das and his wife, I don't remember, Dilip and I'm drawing a blank, but they actually had an after school program, and one of the activities was catching voles. So let's see, it's probably this one. Let's zoom in back here.
Yeah, back there, up at the top.
Let's see.
Well, right before the roughage starts, or the rough area, right there. What is
right here?
Is that an optical illusion there? Okay.
Well, and see, this is why a little bit of cover like this makes such you know what I think that might be? That might be the edge of the vole nest. So it looks, voles will chew plant material up, and they make, if you can picture like a cup of a bird nest just turned upside down, they live underneath that. And I'm kind of thinking that's the entrance right there. Here's the cup, and here's where the vole was going in.
What caught my eye was a little to the left of that, down where like those two eyes, but maybe that's just the grass.
Let's zoom back in again, little to the left
of that hole, right? Well, right there where your pointer is right now.
Right here.
But it's not. That's an optical illusion, I think.
It's one of the creatures.
Yeah. Carol wanted me to ask too about what do you do with the salamanders then when you catch them?
So okay, yeah. So the salamander, I didn't really elaborate much on that. So the salamander monitoring we also look not at not just the number, but the general health. So Ryan Solomon, he's our lead restoration ecologist. He's the one who oversees the project. They measure the salamanders. We try to minimize handling because being amphibians, their skin is porous. They actually can take oxygen into their bodies through their skin. So, but we do want to get a measurement. We measure from the snout, so the tip of the nose to the vent or the cloaca. We do not include the tail length. And each year, then we see the size of the salamander population. We also check for sex ratios, number of males and the number of females. And as soon as we get that data, then they're taken to the pond's edge and they're released and they swim off. Probably, let's see, it's March 21st. I would say there might already be some eggs in the water. Eggs don't take very long to hatch. The salamander larvae then stay in the pond until about August. It's a little temperature dependent, their development, but they do not stay in the pond over the winter. They will emerge in mid to late summer, make the trek back up the hill, find their own little burrow to hang out in. So and we don't mark and recapture. We're not, I'm sure we're catching a lot of the same salamanders year after year, but we don't mark them to keep track of them that way. We do know that salamanders can live 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So there's a good chance that we are seeing the same individuals year after year. But the purpose of the study is just to make sure that we're not doing anything that would cause the population numbers to go down, that they're at least holding on or rising over time.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Greg. Hi, Carol. Folks, that's what we had tonight. Look at some good things, some bad things, some ugly things. Sorry about those, but I really appreciate you tuning in on this first full day of spring. Look forward to seeing you back again next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye, Pam. Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Pam.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Pam.
Thanks,
Pam.
Pam.
Good night, Pam.
Night.